Manchester. Center for Spiritual Living, Greater Baltimore, Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson has frequently been referred to as a Renaissance man. One look at his resume and the reason becomes clear. As a lifelong learner with a passion for self-development, personal transformation, transmutation, and self-awakening, he lives his bliss as a teacher, minister, mentor, speaker, minister, and so much more. His mission is to live, move, and be an active, which is an acronym, authentic, compassionate, transparent, inspired, vibrant, and empowered member of society who serves to educate, elucidate, emancipate, awaken, and empower communities. I give you Reverend Dr. Ray.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Good morning and greetings. Happy Halloween. So it's the end of the month. And this whole month, we've been talking about this whole idea of, we being greater than the individual me. And this week, the idea is I'll meet you there. Now, on an average, I don't have a difficult time with, what I'm going to say. There were a couple of things in this week's outline per se that I was like, why? Because I've seen far too many people use some of the things that we're going to discuss and sort of bypass or negate various experiences of people. And if we're on the growing edge, you can't do that. What Diane spoke about. If we are going to demonstrate, manifest, and create a world that works for all, then we can't simply bypass or ignore or invalidate various people's experiences. But nonetheless, let us begin. So as we near, I'll meet you there. As we near the top of the mountain and prepare to pause, we remember that we are reaching toward an experience of divine communion with ourselves, one another, and clearly with spirit. This pause is a time of active reflection. Then Rumi says, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about ideas, languages, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. So we're jumping off with this idea from Rumi, and we're going to start with this idea of out beyond the ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. Okay, there is a field. There is a field. Say what now? There's a field beyond right doing and wrongdoing. Yeah, but I hear you. But let's also be mindful of what James Baldwin says when he says, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. Now let's pause. Because ultimately, this idea that Rumi is inviting us into, moving beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, is not an invitation to simply bypass and say, well, racism isn't wrong, it simply is. Sexism isn't wrong, it simply is. The idea of colonization, which is rooted deeply in the idea of I have to commit genocide to take, it just is. It's not wrong. That is spiritual bypass and metaphysical malpractice. And it is a violation of one's ethical imperative, moral imperative, and spiritual imperative. So let's be clear that this idea of right doing and wrong doing, which we're going to get deeper into, is the practice that Diane alluded to when she spoke about the growing edge. Because one of the things we tend to do is, let's take a slight pause. One of the things we tend to do is we focus on specific aspects of what's going on or what's showing up in the condition, etc. And in Ephesians 6:12, it says, we are not fighting against humans, but we are fighting against forces and authorities and the rulers of darkness, right? That's what this passage is saying. The remix, however, is we are not fighting against humans. We are transforming paradigms, forces and authorities of consciousness, and the manifestation of rulers of non-life affirming policies, laws, and practices that show up in the physical world. And we can't do that effectively if we are not very clear and very committed to what energy we are referring to when we are saying beyond the ideas of right doing and wrongdoing. Because often what we do when we focus on the actions of right doing and wrongdoing, the ideas of that, we focus on the people, not the paradigms or the consciousness that the people are practicing. So it would almost be like you go to the hospital, you're a doctor, and you go to the hospital for your rounds, and someone comes into the ER with a gunshot wound. And what you focus on is the one single individual who did the shooting, as if focusing on them is going to heal the patient. And then in law enforcement, you once again focus on the individual shooter, and more precisely, you focus on the individual gun rather than the energy of consciousness that created gun and created shooter in the first place. So if we're going to do this and we're going to do it for real, then we must step into a greater level of being, a greater awareness of being, focusing on the consciousness and the paradigms. Science of Mind says we must transcend the appearance. Even though we admit it is a fact, we are not so cold-blooded as to say to a person with pain that there is no such thing as pain. Pause. Because I know, because Monday and Tuesday, girl, please, Monday and Tuesday, I was in so much pain. If somebody had popped up to me and said, Reverend Ray, there is no such thing as, Tracy, call security. I need this person to be excommunicated from my bedroom because they are telling me lies, right? So we are not so cold-blooded as to tell this person that there is no pain when they are in pain. We admit the fact. It is quite different to admit its necessity. Pain doesn't have to be, suffering doesn't have to be a necessity. Because oftentimes we make it sound like, well, you have to suffer in order to grow. You have to go through, all these horrible relationships till you find manifest the right and perfect. No, it's not a necessity. Disease, accordingly, is a fact, but it is not a truth. So we're hey, Tracy, we back in the field again. Probably, did you cut the grass? Well, no, you didn't cut the grass. So there is a field. Now, for those of you who have been here any number of times, or you know me, you know that I love to reference the idea that anything that exists in our physical realm is a demonstration of what must exist in spirit. So there is a field. Well, what does that even mean? Well, let's pause and think about how many different ways do we reference field? Oh, field of electricity, field of magnetism, the field of gravitational magnetism of the earth, the field of gravitational in space. Oh, field. Oh, there's also an acoustic field. a field of vision, and an auric field. What do all of these point to and demonstrate as truth? A field of consciousness. None of these could exist were it not for the field of consciousness that is God itself, spirit itself, life itself, the thing itself. So no matter what this field is or where it shows up, because these are just a couple of the ways that we reference this idea. All of them point to the divine template back of all of them, the divine idea back of all of them, the divine truth back of all of them, field of consciousness. So if any of those are to change, then they change in consciousness, and then the outward changes as well. Thomas Troward says, what we shall eventually attain is not what we merely wish, but what we regard as normal. What we shall eventually attain, have, be, do, is not simply what we wish for, but rather it is what we regard as being normal. Are miracles exceptional, or are miracles normal? That's normal. What's normal? Being healthy is normal. Being wealthy, joyful, being in awe is normal. When we recognize that none of this is by way of wishful thinking, but by recognizing that all of this exists within and as that which God is, therefore it is normal. It is not some, I'm hoping for a miracle, as if the miracle is that one golden ticket that Charlie needed to get into the chocolate factory. And then he found, oh, it's a miracle. Miracles are not really what we expect. We hope for them, we wish for them, but we don't expect them, which is why when they show up, we're like, oh my goodness, it's a miracle, rather than it's normal. That's the way spirit operates. Spirit operates in, through, and as all of this. And when we recognize this as normal in the grand field of consciousness, the grand experience of life itself, then we attain them, because we recognize that if they're normal, if these things are normal, then they're already who and what we are. And breathe. Science of Mind says, we cannot be in peace until we know that the spirit is the only cause, medium, and effect in our lives. Once again, it goes back to what we just said. We cannot experience, we cannot attain peace until we know that peace, as it expresses in, through, and as spirit, is the only cause, the only medium, and the only effect in our lives. It is normal for God to act upon itself. It's normal. There is no past, present, or future to it. Evil has no history and has never entered into the being or the experience of capital R reality. There is no evil that can experience or be experienced within the scope of absolute what God is. Humans can do things that are quote unquote evil. Why? Because they are not in a state of peace. They do not know what spirit is. They do not know that spirit is the only cause, medium, and effect in all life and in their life. They don't know. And because they don't know, they act upon a false assumption and premise. And that false assumption and premise is one of lack, scarcity, fear, etc. Breathe. Mary O'Malley says, opening to life brings you into full engagement with what is happening, rather than keeping you caught in a conversation about life. It means giving up your war with what life is bringing you. Now pause, because life isn't bringing you anything. Life is not an anthropomorphic something that is saying, you know what, Diane needs to be on the growing edge. So what I'm going to do is put obstacles in her way. Doesn't work that way. You know, Reverend Ray needs to be in the growing edge. So what I'm going to do is take some things. Life doesn't work that way. God has no need to operate upon itself in a way where it is operating against itself. So it means giving up your war with what happens, what is occurring in your life. But I want to talk about this idea of war for a moment, because there's all kinds of wars. We see them in anthropomorphic stories and mythologies, etc., whether it's the rebel forces and the empire of Star Wars, whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it's Dune. War occurs. Why? Because one, we don't understand what we are at war with. What are you at war with? Who are you at war with? Because once again, this is a metaphysical opportunity that if I consider myself a rebel alliance in the Star Wars saga, and there's the Imperial forces, what do they represent? Because once again, we are not fighting humans, but rather paradigms of consciousness. Sith, the consciousness of, what is that? The consciousness of the Harkonnens, what is that? And then, are you ready to heal and experience or attain peace? Because if you are, then we have to understand that one, when I sit back, because remember, today's theme is to reflect, to pause and reflect. And if I'm going to pause and reflect and say, okay, so I'm at war with others. Well, what does that mean? I'm at war with friends. I'm at war with family. Am I at war with my finances? Is that who I'm at war with? Or is this battle of war not even a me versus them, but a me versus me, because I'm at war with myself? How might that be showing up? Within my body, within my mind, within my spirit? How might this contentious energy be showing up? Anytime you say things like, oh, I'm just so stupid. That's a concept of war. You are at war with yourself. You are not stupid. You never were stupid. You cannot be stupid. You can make choices that are less than life affirming. You can make choices that were not rooted in wisdom. It does not make you stupid. I'm so clumsy. I'm such a klutz. These anti-affirmations, which technically they're affirmations, but they're affirmations for the very thing you desire not to be. It's the evidence of war. But ultimately, what did Diane say for those who were present during the pre-service meditation? Diane said, and I did just pause on my paraphrase because I don't remember word for word, but she referenced this idea that life, God, spirit, is experiencing itself in how it is expressing itself. So ultimately, this idea of being at war with others and being at war with self is actually a war with God. God is all there is. So when we are fighting with another, we're fighting with God. We're fighting with the concept of God. We are wrestling with some idea of separation. Because once again, it's not me against you. It's me working through the consciousness of that made you do what you did. What was the consciousness that made you get behind the wheel of a car and drive that car down a crowded street in Charlottesville, killing and hurting? What is the consciousness that made that action your choice? You as an individual, I understand and recognize you are God. You simply do not know it. However, I hold you accountable for your actions. And in order to do so from a spiritual point of view, I must address the paradigms and the consciousness of lack, scarcity, xenophobia, etc. Because that is where the healing occurs. How I reconcile my consciousness, how I address, and then how I walk the walk accordingly. Alan Watts says, to the enlightened individual, it appears as a vivid and overwhelming certainty that the universe precisely as it is at this moment as a whole and in every one of its parts is so completely right as to need no explanation or justification beyond what simply is. This is where we get our idea, our concept of we are whole, perfect, and complete. We need not justify it, explain it. It is what is. It is the truth of spirit. It is the truth of the universe. Therefore, it is the truth of us. We need not explain or justify our existence. It is because God is. Breathe. So let us keep in mind then that means there is nowhere that we need to go to be more godly. There is no sacred site that makes us more of what we already are. There is no specific mantra that makes us more of what we are. It is a grounded and anchored practice, moment by moment, of recognizing and realizing in this moment, right here and right now, that the isness and allness of spirit is incarnating itself in, through, and as you right now. Right now. Whole, perfect, and complete. The field of consciousness of life itself is what you are. It's not simply where you go, it's what you are. You are the incarnated physical demonstration of the field of consciousness of love, making itself form. You are the physical expression of the one, individualizing itself as the many, and yet, nonetheless, there's only one. Pause, remember, and reflect, recognizing. Rumi also says, do not feel lonely. The entire universe is inside you, which we understand. The entire universe is inside of you, outside of you. It is you. Stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. Set your life on fire. Set it ablaze. Shine your light so powerfully that it transforms all lives that you come in contact with. There is a field of infinite consciousness beyond the ideas of separation, lack, and scarcity. Because remember, once again, we are transforming paradigms, forces, and authorities of consciousness, not people. Malcolm X says, don't be in a hurry to condemn because this other person doesn't do what you think or what you do or think as you think. Don't look at them and say, Tracy, why aren't you? Don't be in a hurry to condemn someone else because they don't do what you do or think the way that you think. Or do it as fast as you. There was a time when you didn't know what you currently know today. There was a time when you didn't do what you currently do today. You didn't meditate. Why rush someone else to meditate? You didn't pray and treat. Why rush for someone else to learn how to do it and do it well when it's like state of ease and grace? Each of us is in that state of the growing edge based upon our own timing, our own individual. What do we say? When the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear. When the individual is ready, the change occurs. We are simply there to hold the container, be the space, be the willing field of consciousness that encourages it, but we need not condemn, we need not rush. Be present, do our work. Invite them, as Sky said. So look, check this out. When you're here, you know, when your backpack, it's got holes and stuff in it and you need help, I'm there. When this is going on in your life, I'm there, I'm with you. You're not alone. I am with you. And remember that the infinite I am that we understand to be spirit, I am that I am, ever becoming, has to be right where you are. You are not, nor can you ever be alone. for the entirety of the universe must be with you. So field of consciousness, field of existence. The full Rumi poem goes on to say, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Because keep in mind, we often talk about that still small voice of God. As I've told you before, it is not a small voice. The voice of God is loud and clear. Tracy said, we just don't listen. We're too busy listening to, but there isn't enough. But I don't have enough. But they don't like me. I don't know how to. And because those voices are louder, the voice of truth comes across as a whisper, but it's always there, loud and clear. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Didn't Yeshua say, when you pray, pray as though you already have the thing you are? Ask for what you want and ask with conviction. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Be open, be welcoming, be affirming, be celebratory. You know, this time of Halloween or Samhain, it is often spoken about the veil between the worlds is very thin. That door sill between the outside and the inside is very thin. The doorway between the growing edge and the stagnant whatever is very thin. We can simply recognize that at any moment we are able to take a step. Even if you're like me and got to take a step with a crutch, take the step. Don't go back to sleep. Take the step and recognize there is room enough for what you desire, because your desire must be the desire of the universe expressing as you. Don't think so small. Don't play so small. Recognize the isness and allness of life itself is living, moving, and breathing itself as you. Reverend Dr. Ray says, there is at the deepest truth of ourselves, the infinite and absolute, called by many names. Each day, the opportunity to know this as the ground of our being is before us. When we reflect upon this truth, reflect, I love the word reflect, because it reminds me of reflection. What we reflect upon can only be what is accurate, because I am never going to look in a mirror and see Tracy's face. If I do something wrong, I am never going to look into a mirror and see Renuka's face. Because if I do something wrong, I'm never going to look in the mirror and see Dedra's face. Because if I do something wrong, you'll have hair. And so keep in mind, the reflection is showing us some aspect that must be right before us. When we reflect upon this truth, we experience life differently. We think differently. We speak differently. We feel and act differently because we know more powerfully, more authentically who and what we are. Breathe. Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
This week's opportunity to practice. Can y'all pray for me?
Pray. See, prayer works.
It works if you work it. Hey, Tracy, can you treat my feet?
I'm going to treat your feet.
This actually works this week. Okay, so
That's a rhyme.
what does it mean for you to pause, to remember, and to reflect on truth? Jot that down in your journal. What does it mean for you to pause, for you to reflect, for you to remember what truth is? What does it mean to you? What or who have you been or are currently at war with?
That's a list.
And what have been the casualties of war? So what has suffered as a result of that war with, or, whoever, whatever it is you are at war with? What has suffered? What has been a casualty as a result of it? And what does Rumi, the poem by Rumi, the full poem, what does it invite you to know, embody, or practice in your life? Because it's a beautiful poem. It's great to, read, recite, hear, watch the interpreter's signs. It's great, it's beautiful. But what does it mean as an application of spiritual truth? How do you apply it? How do you embody it? What does it mean for you? And then lastly, have a conversation with 5 people about the quotes from James Baldwin that we went over today, the quote by Malcolm X that we went over today, and as they pertain to the full poem by Rumi. So compare the full poem by Rumi, Malcolm X, what he said, James Baldwin, what he said. Where do you see similarities of truth being shared? Or do you not? This week's affirmation declaration. I'll say it first, and if you feel so inspired, join in with me. I step out, freed from my old limiting ideas. I rise into a fresh new field of infinite possibilities because of my freedom. Together, I step out, freed from my old limiting ideas. I rise into a fresh new field of infinite possibilities because of my freedom. Breathe. So simply recognizing as we close service, we understand, had a sharp pain just now. We breathe, push.
Okay. All right. Push myself my way out. Push myself my way out.
And as we anchor into our benediction, recognizing that just because this Sunday service is coming to a close, we understand that God, acting upon God, that thing that we understand is life itself, is always in service to itself, with itself, from itself. And so we go out and do what we are here to do. We are here to be the very power and presence of spirit, love made flesh. Anchoring and grounding, knowing that this entire service, from the beginning with pre-service meditation on through prayer and music and message and announcements and laughter and fellowship, that this is all of the ways in which spirit came together with itself to know itself more deeply, to experience itself more deeply, to love itself more deeply. It is good. It is always good. It continues to be good. And this goodness is anchored in the law that says yes, always says yes, can only say yes. And this is already done in, as, and through the mind of God, where it is already fully formed and fully functioning as answered prayer. It is done. It is good. And so it is. Love you.